here to talk about a restoration project that I manage with the South Beaver River Citizens League, or SYRCL, called the Haskell Peak Meadows Restoration Project, and we'll be focusing on the hydrologic restoration that took place as part of that project. So I want to introduce us just to the project site as a whole. It's in the beautiful state of California in the Sierra Nevada mountains. So right here we're looking at the Yuba River watershed as a whole. And Nevada City's down there in red, where our office is, and the meadow project we're talking about is in the North Yuba watershed at the tip-top headwaters. So we're just to the northwest of Truckee, if you guys are familiar with that. Yeah, upstream of Sierra City and Dillonville. So this project is made up of 5 distinct meadows in 3 unique watersheds. Working from left to right, we have West Church all the way on the left, Freeman, Haskell Headwater Fen, Chapman Saddle, and Bear Trap Meadow, respectively. These 5 meadows make up 229 acres of meadow, meadow edge, and fen habitat. So meadow degradation has happened throughout the Sierra Nevada mountains at a pretty astonishing rate. There's about 280,000 acres of known meadow in the Sierra Nevada, and current research indicates that 50% of those meadows are in a degraded state. The typical suspects, the suspected cause of that degradation is logging, homesteading with the onset of European settlers, grazing, because meadows make great flat spaces for people to graze, and the diversion of water in meadows to use for irrigation or mining purposes. In a degraded meadow, we often have incised stream channels, an inset floodplain. So in the photograph here from Chapman Saddle, you guys can see a severely incised channel and a lush green patch in that incised channel there. I also want to call attention to the stumps and logs that are all along the banks of this channel in Chapman Saddle. And then through this degradation, meadows lose their ecosystem services. So meadows that are degraded are not storing as much carbon as healthy meadows. A healthy meadow actually stores about 3 times as much carbon as their adjacent woodlands. So when our meadows become degraded, not only are they storing less carbon, they actually become carbon sources as that soil carbon becomes available to microorganisms. So looking at the project timeline specifically, this project was started in the planning phases in 2020, and from 2020 to 2022, we were doing pre-project monitoring and planning. Our pre-restoration was pretty extensive. We did a ton of vegetation monitoring using the Sierra Meadows Partnership RAMP protocol. We also monitored hydrology in all 5 of the meadows at a whole bunch of groundwater wells and stream gauges. We hired out carbon monitoring to the University of Nevada, Reno at 4 of the 5 project meadows, and we collected baseline conifer data to have a sense of how much conifers were encroaching into these degraded meadows. We also conducted a disturbance inventory during this stage of the process, so we wanted to find out what source problems we were dealing with that was causing the degradation in these sites. And through that disturbance inventory, we identified 3 major concerns. One being the image on the left. There was a road bisecting West Church Meadow at about 90 degrees, and that road completely diverted flows out of the meadow and around a whole lobe of the meadow. So we had a really wet top and a really dry bottom caused by that road. And that road was thought to be built during the homesteading period. And you can see it's lined with trees, right, or was lined with trees, because who doesn't love a tree-lined driveway? We also noticed culverts as a problem in these sites. So at Freeman, the picture in the middle was taken about 50 feet downstream of a culvert that was passing water under a Forest Service road. That culvert was undersized, and that undersized culvert resulted in increased velocity and more erosive streams moving through the meadow. So the image in the middle here is about 1.5 feet in size, not allowing water to kick out onto the meadow surface. And we also noticed grazing as a key concern in all of these meadows. So during the fall, every year, about 1,200 sheep are released into the Haskell Peak area, and we identified those sheep as being slightly problematic for a few reasons. Right? Grazing alone is not problematic, but improper timing of grazing can have detrimental impacts on meadow ecosystems. So when these animals are released onto the site too early, the meadow's trying to grow all those beautiful forbs and grasses that we all love, but the sheep can stunt the growth of those and prevent them from going to seed. So we noticed we had bare ground as a result of the seed bank not being replenished. And we also identified bank destabilization that was being caused by these animals crossing over streams. And that bank destabilization makes the channel much more susceptible to erosion. All of these disturbances combined really dry out meadow ecosystems. So the map on the right here is showing that relic road that was completely dewatering the lower portion of West Church Meadow. And I want to call your attention to the relic stream channel that you can see that arrow pointing to. That stream channel was not receiving water because the road was diverting flows, right? So we can see where the water wants to be moving, but it's being prevented from accessing those areas because of our human changes to the ecosystem. And there's a picture of that culvert that's passing water under the Forest Service road, and there was a fun little animation about how that culvert is contributing to erosion. When meadows become dried out, they are very susceptible to conifer encroachment, right? So meadows have beautiful, rich soils, and as they become more dry, young conifers will establish on the fringe of the meadow and work their way inwards. So we have a few photographs here from 1939 to 2024, and in 2019 you can really see how we almost completely lost both Chapman Saddle and Bear Trap meadows in these images. And conifer encroachment is not a symptom of meadow degradation, right? It's something that the degradation allows for. And we actually were shared an article by a colleague from 1902 where the U.S. Geologic Society identified that the system was degraded and that it had once not long ago been a much more wet ecosystem. So as early as 1902, we know that this system was experiencing degradation caused by humans and the onset of European settlers. And you'll notice in 2024 that something pretty drastic happens, right? All of a sudden, these meadows are completely clear of that conifer encroachment. Oh, wrong way. That was not a part of this project. It was actually a result of really good timing. So during the time that we were planning the Haskell Peak Meadows Restoration Project, the Forest Service and the National Forest Foundation were working on the Yuba project, which was a forest health related conifer thinning fuel reduction project. And we were able to come in and restore the hydrology of these meadows where they did thinning. Had we not come in and restored the hydrology, these conifers would just reestablish in the site, right? So it was really important that our work was coinciding with their work, allowing for these meadows to really become much more resilient. So after we identified all of these issues that we wanted to resolve, we had to go through planning. And we worked with an engineering firm called ProRest to design a few things. We identified that we wanted to pull out that culvert that was constricting flows, and we decided to replace it with a low water crossing. So this is happening on a low-use Forest Service dirt road. It's not a huge road that needed a whole bunch of stuff, but we knew we could add an armored low water crossing using locally sourced rocks to allow flows to pass over the road instead of under through a culvert. And we also identified that we needed to do some in-stream work using low-tech process-based restoration. So on the right, you can see a schematic that shows how beaver dam analogs, or BDAs, can reactivate meadow floodplains. Moving along in our timeline, from in 2023, we went into the implementation phase, and we continued project monitoring. So here's some awesome pictures of BDAs at work. These were taken about a month after they were installed. And a BDA is a beaver dam analog. In the middle, I want to call your attention to a log that's to the left of the stream. So all of these structures are built with on-site materials. These trees are taken from the meadow fringe area and used to build this structure. So everything is locally sourced. And not only does that remove encroaching conifers, it reactivates the meadow floodplain. In our first year of implementation, we built over 325 structures in these 5 meadows. So that was a huge push, and it was really exciting to get out there and see these structures working right away. Continuing on to last year, in 2024, we kept doing implementation. We started some of that road work we had designed. We built even more LTPBR structures, that's low-tech process-based restoration, and we continued our project monitoring. So here's a picture of West Church Road before and after implementation in 2024. You can see that image that I showed y'all earlier of the road. The road base was about 1.5 feet above the meadow surface. So we had to remove all of that material, store it on site, and we intentionally left the replaced road base loose and roughened so that vegetation could establish and so that the meadow could kind of decide where it wanted to flow, right? We didn't want to tell the meadow what it had to do. And here's a video of that implementation work happening. And my contractor had to grub out all of those tree stumps, right? So we had to go in there and dig out all those stumps. It was quite an extensive effort. And where there were higher flow areas that already existed, we left big rocks in place to prevent head cuts from migrating or establishing. Then here's a picture of Freeman low water crossing. So in Freeman Meadow, we pulled out that culvert and we replaced it with an armored ford or an armored low water crossing. These are both post-implementation photos. On the left, we're looking downstream. I want to call your attention to the big rocks on the lower portion. So we use those as kind of a grade control at the bottom of this water crossing. And on the right here, you can see how the water is able to move through the interstitial spaces between the rocks and isn't confined into a narrow culvert. And here's a video of that culvert getting pulled out. This was a really gratifying moment for me. And there's me flying the drone on the side. Okay. And then after we over-excavated and pulled out the culvert, we went ahead and started putting locally sourced large rocks into the channel. So we filled in the base of the channel where the culvert had been pulled out with the large material, and we worked our way to about 3- rock to cover the surface. We also mixed in dirt to make sure it was really well held together. And in 2024, we actually had some really exciting things happen. We submitted an application to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife for beaver relocation at the project meadows. So that was a big deal. And we also added an entirely new meadow to this project. So I want to introduce you guys to Church Meadow. Church Meadow is about 149 acres, and it sits in between West Church Meadow and Freeman Meadow at the base of the Sierra Buttes. So you can see those beautiful buttes. We're going to pan to the right, and you'll see Church Meadow. That's where we did that road decommissioning this year, or last year. And we're going to fly up. I want to call your attention to the beautiful, wet-looking stream channels, right? This video was taken in early June of last year, so the meadow was super wet. We had a pretty solid snow year, but all of those channels are about 1.5 feet in size to 3 feet in size. So just imagine how much the water would kick out or reactivate the floodplain if those channels weren't as incised as they are. We also identified another meadow bisect road in Church Meadow proper that we want to deal with, as well as a few other things. Moving into 2025, we're going to continue building LTPBR structures in all 6 of the project meadows. And we're also planning to do some of that road work in Church Meadow. In the summer of 2025, we have a whole bunch of monitoring plans, so we'll be monitoring all aspects of the stuff included in this project. That'll be the vegetation monitoring at 29 different belt transects. I want to thank my colleague Summer, who's sitting here. She's our botanist, and I wouldn't be able to do any of it without her. We'll be doing hydrology monitoring, continued carbon monitoring with University of Nevada, Reno, and we'll be doing conifer reestablishment monitoring in a few of those meadows. We also have a tribal site visit and a tribal BDA build training schedule, and a tour with the Department of Fish and Wildlife pending a forest supervisor signature, and another year of BDA work. I want to say thank you, and that I think that this project just speaks to the power of addressing issues at the source, the power of partnerships, and the importance of really extensive monitoring to prove that the restoration that you're doing is working. Thank you.